Freedom of choice, as presidential candidate Ron Paul, shouldn't just be restricted to choices he approves of. He opposes things like prostitution and drug use, but says the federal government has no business trying to stop adults from doing them. You would legalize marijuana, cocaine, heroin?
I would get the government out of regulating all those substances, and I would allow the states to deal with problems, whether children should have them, whether children can buy cigarettes and alcohol or hard drugs, marijuana, and different states would probably do different things. The first federal law against marijuana was 1938, and they did it through high taxation because they knew they didn't have authority to say that you're not allowed to smoke marijuana. Today, it's gone berserk. The federal government comes in and overrules a state that has legalized marijuana to be used for very sick people, AIDS and cancer, and they're getting some help. The federal government comes in, puts people in prison that are sick because they're using it for medical reasons, and they've never committed a violent crime. That's how absurd the war on drugs has become.
He's just trying to take care of me the best way he knew how.
Friday is a day wrought with emotion for 61-year-old Sherry Burton. The husband she has known and loved as her partner for 44 years is now a convicted felon, she says, for trying to protect her.
If I didn't have Gary there to hang on to me and hold me and say it's okay, I probably wouldn't have got through a lot of those days.
Sherry suffers from depression and anxiety and was diagnosed with breast cancer that has now spread to her lymph nodes. It was a major blow to the couple, but she says Gary wanted to ease her fear and pain with something natural, something he could provide on his own.
It's helped me in sleeping at night. Even though I'm on other medication, it still helps me to relax and not be consumed with the cancer. One was here, the other one was here.
The couple chose this spot for 2 marijuana plants secluded in their own Chippewa Lake.
I said, I'm a physician, and I can vouch for the fact that some very sick people benefit from marijuana. Sick people that have AIDS and cancer can use marijuana and benefit by it, and then compassionate conservatives come along and they arrest them under federal law. They overrule state law, and they put sick people in prison for this. It makes no sense, and I don't know why we should be such strong supporters of Roosevelt's position to go ahead and tax and then eventually lead to making it illegal. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I believe in a free society and making freedom of choice.
All right, let's In court today, Gillingham says he has 3 children. The home is on Goethe Street in Buffalo's Lovejoy district. Gillingham claims to have back pain and says that's why the plants are at his house.
Thank you. Medical marijuana. See, I'm growing it. It's not a narcotic. It's just a plant. Yes, it's mine.
How much did you have?
I don't even know how much is there. I had enough to make so didn't feel pain, didn't hurt.
It may be one man's medicine, but it's still illegal under New York state law.
Medical marijuana.
Could be. When you're talking about so-called medical marijuana, the substance THC is actually already available in prescription form. It's a prescription drug called Marinol. It's used to treat the very things. There is no medication that is used by smoking. In fact, marijuana smoke has 4 times the tar of tobacco smoke. It has some 400 harmful substances in it. So, don't tell me you need marijuana for medical purposes.
How young is too young to be using medicinal marijuana?
How young is too young to use aspirin? How young is too young to use penicillin?
A retired physician and professor at Harvard Medical School, Lester Grinspoon, wrote the book on marijuana. Literally. In the 70s, his son Danny, who had cancer, used the drug to counter the pain of his chemotherapy before his death.
I can tell you, it isn't going to harm him. It is remarkably non-toxic.
You understand how some people hear of a boy taking marijuana and they're going, that doesn't seem right.
It's because we have been brainwashed about this substance.
Experimenting with a noxious weed. The facts are otherwise. Marijuana is an intoxicating, mind-muddling drug. Its use can lead to abnormal behavior, to psychological dependence, and to abuse of other drugs. The human brain, after all, is made for thinking, not fumigating. It's hardly a tinker toy for experimenting with drugs. This has been the public service message of the American Medical Association.
We have been brainwashed about this substance. There will come a time when people will recognize that this is a wonder drug of our times. It does so much in terms of relieving some of the symptoms which are very difficult for parents to deal with, let alone the child.
I think Spokane raided several medical marijuana dispensaries today, enforcing federal law that makes selling or possessing marijuana illegal. But for some families, that drug is a godsend in treating a variety of diseases. 2-year-old Cash Hyde was diagnosed last year with a stage 4 brain tumor. He nearly died more times than his family can count and was miserable from the high-dose chemo coursing through his tiny body until his dad turned to a controversial place and gave cannabis to his young son. KXLY4's Melissa Luck is here, been working on this story.
Yeah, controversial, Robin, is an understatement. Medical marijuana is a political football both here in Washington and in Cashy's home state of Montana. But his father said to me, when your child is dying of cancer, you'll do anything you can to help. His choice defied doctors, but he says saved Cashy's life.
June 21st, 2008 is a day Mike and Callie Hyde will never forget.
He was just a healthy little boy, born there in Missoula.
Cash Michael Hyde's very first birthday, a family now complete. They never could have imagined the journey little Cashy's life would take.
He was just your average, happy little kid, and then he just started to get sick.
It was shortly before Cashy's second birthday when Dad Mike knew something wasn't right.
Well, he started being very tired, sleeping a lot, very cranky. He started to throw up. We started taking him to the doctor, and the doctor would tell us that he had mono.
For 6 weeks, it was the same diagnosis over and over, but Mike refused to accept what doctors were telling him. He knew, like any parent would, that something was terribly wrong.
I was like, it feels like he's dying in my arms. We need to take him somewhere else, you know, and so we took him to the ER, and that's when they did a CAT scan on him, and they found a 4.5 centimeter tumor in his brain. They loaded him up, and they were gone to Salt Lake City within a matter of a couple hours of finding the tumor.
At Salt Lake's Primary Children's Hospital came the devastating news. Their little boy was facing incredible odds. Brain surgery revealed a peanut tumor wrapped around Cashy's optic nerve.
When we arrived in Salt Lake in May, Cashy was so sick that, I mean, his eye was starting to get pushed out. He was sleeping 16 to 18 hours a day. He was vomiting. He was pretty much as sick as, you know, you can get without being, you know, on your deathbed.
Doctors cut into Cashy's brain to remove what they could, only about 10% of the tumor. The Hydes could only hope aggressive treatment could get the rest. 3 rounds of chemo followed by stem cell rescue, then 3 rounds of high-dose chemo after that. A difficult treatment plan for anyone, so imagine what it did to a 2-year-old kid.
So the first night of chemo, we did 10 hours with the seizures down in the ICU. And, you know, the doctors told us then he could have brain damage from these seizures. We don't know where it's going to be in the morning. Just going to have to wait and find out.
Cashy spent his second birthday in a hospital bed, swollen and sick from the medication intended to save his life. Doctors were uncertain he would make it to his 3rd birthday.
It's overwhelming, I guess, to say the least, and we had a lot of scary things happen in June. He got a blood infection, went into septic shock, went to the ICU, ended up coding, and they had to resuscitate him. I was standing like 2 feet away. I had to watch the whole thing. There was a lot of days we were getting told we weren't going to beat it. You know, you're not going to take him home. He is going to die. And those are the days where you really got to really believe.
They believed and they prayed. High-dose chemo was killing his cancer, but it was making Cashy sicker than ever. He was taking 120 milligrams a day of 5 different drugs to try to make him comfortable. But that, Mike said, wasn't helping ease Cashy's pain.
That's going to help get the tape off. I'm going to hold this, okay?
By the end of September, he had gone 40 days without eating. He was vomiting 9 to 10 times a day. He couldn't lift his head off his pillow. He was literally laying there shivering in his bed. And the doctors came in, and I said, is there anything we can do for Cash?
The doctors had no answers, so Mike found his own. Relief in the form of a controversial oil, cannabis, illegal for you and I to possess, and something Cashy's doctors wouldn't even discuss. Mike got authorization to give Cashy the oil, and without telling them why, he told the doctors to wean Cashy off the nausea cocktail. Inserted through Cashy's feeding tube, a tiny amount of oil replaced all those drugs. The result, Mike says, was almost immediate.
You're watching a kid that hasn't had the will to eat in 4 months, 5 months, actually take a bite of something. He hadn't eaten a thing in 40 days, and it was really incredible just to watch him take a bite of a piece of cheese, you know. It's showing that he wants to live.
There you go.
Cashy did his last round of high-dose chemo with no anti-nausea drugs. Mike says the doctors told him they were amazed. Mike never told them why.
I wanted to tell him, hey, he's on cannabis oil, but I was afraid they would take it away from him.
But Mike Hyde doesn't care about the controversy or about the political battle over this drug. He cares that his son survived and is convinced not only did the cannabis oil make Cashy feel better, it prevented long-term damage to his organs. For Mike, the living proof is in this vibrant 2-year-old boy.
Yeah, it's very controversial, it's very scary, but there's nothing more scary than about losing your child.
A week after we did this interview, Cashy was back in Salt Lake for scans, finding out he's cancer-free. He's back home in Missoula, back with his family, back to teasing his big brother Colty. Cashy will spend his 3rd birthday like every kid should, with the fight of his life behind him.
And the state of Montana estimates that of the 28,000 medical marijuana patients in the state, 51 are kids under the age of 18. And Robin, we try to get those numbers from Washington, but our state does not track who has medical marijuana permits, who's allowed to get them. It's just simply not tracked, so we have no idea here in Washington.
And after today's raids, we kind of understand that it might be even longer before we have any more answers.
That's right, and that's something that we talked to the Hydes about at the time. We did this interview a couple of weeks ago, and that's the one thing Mike said, whether you agree with it or not, every time they take down one of these dispensaries, there might be a kid or someone in a hospital somewhere that depends on it. So everybody involved just wants the government and the jurisdictions to just get it sorted.
New Jersey could be following California's lead and going to pot, trying to use marijuana in hospitals, but are they taking it upon themselves to override the FDA? New Jersey State Senator Nicholas Scuteri and David Evans, the executive director of the Drug-Free Schools Coalition, join us for a fair and balanced debate. Good morning, both of you.
Good morning.
Senator, why do you, you're the fellow who has written the law. You say that New Jersey hospitals have come to you asking, hey, we want to make pot legal in the hospitals?
New Jersey teaching hospitals have presented a proposal to our new Republican administration and asked them to be one of the prime dispensaries during this medical marijuana manufacturing phase that we're in the process of ferreting out and putting together in a manner that we think is reasoned, controlled, and is going to be in the best interest of all the members of the public.
Now, would they be able to smoke pot, or are we talking about some of those pills with the pot stuff in it?
Well, whatever the doctors believe is the best way to ingest the marijuana.
So it could be smoking pot?
Certainly.
All right. Dave, you got a problem with this?
Well, I have a problem with the whole idea of medical marijuana, but the hospital plan at least is better than what he originally wanted to do. He wanted people to be able to have pot gardens where they could have 6 marijuana plants. Those plants can get as tall as 6 feet and 4 feet wide. And then they moved to setting up pot stores all over New Jersey like they have in California. So this is an improvement.
Well, one of the purposes of having the hospitals allowed to be the dispensaries, that would allow for scientific study of this. I've met with the Department of Health Commissioner recently to talk about this and giving a rollout period to allow the hospitals, the teaching hospitals specifically, to educate new doctors, to study the strains of marijuana, to study its efficacy with respect to these terminally ill patients. And I think terminally ill patients, the last thing they're worried about is contracting cancer from marijuana.
But isn't there something, you would think in a hospital they would have some really potent drugs. Are you telling me that they've run out, smoking pot is better than, you know, the stuff that pharmaceutical companies in New Jersey have developed?
Well, that's the whole purpose of it, is to allow the significant study of marijuana in its efficacy for its medical purposes. And yes, marijuana's been around for years and years and years. No one's ever died from it. And one of the things that the doctors would like to be able to do is to study it in an efficient manner. That's why a significant sole source production might be the best way to roll this out. When I see someone overdose from marijuana, then I'll be concerned that you're correct.